Can you tell us when we've gone live?
You're live now, Councillor.
Thank you, everyone. Can everyone hear okay? In here. Excellent. Before we start, can I ask colleagues to turn their mobile phones to silent? Nothing worse than a vibrating phone to interrupt a presentation. Can cabinet members try and keep your videos on at all times, but put your microphones on mute unless speaking, and everyone else switch off your videos and put microphones on mute until you're invited to speak. If anyone would like to ask a question or speak during a debate, could you please use the raised hand function and I will call you in. Please note the meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be available on the council's website. I would like to welcome you all to our May Cabinet meeting, our first attempt at a hybrid meeting. But first of all, I'd like to really warmly welcome two new members to Cabinet. Councillor Natasha Proctor, Deputy Leader of Harrow Council and Portfolio Holder for Finance and Resources, and Councillor Peymana Assad, who's Portfolio Holder for Community Cohesion, Crime and Enforcement. So welcome to your first Cabinet meeting. The national regulations for holding council meetings have changed, which means Cabinet has to be held in person. However, the COVID regulations mean that we cannot all meet inside in the Civic Centre in a safe environment, so we cannot all be physically present tonight. We have therefore set up tonight as a hybrid meeting to ensure Cabinet members can attend, but only those present in the Civic Centre can formally vote. The arrangements also allow for others to join the meeting remotely, and the meeting can be accessed by residents. So just for the records, tonight in the physical meeting we have Cabinet members Councillor Natasha Proctor, Councillor Varsha Palmer, Councillor Philip O'Dell and myself, Councillor Graham Henson. We are also joined by Councillor Paul Osborne, and there's a number of very few number of council officers. All others will be joining virtually, and they include, one joining virtually is Councillor Sue Anderson, Councillor Simon Brown, Councillor Keith Ferry, Councillor Christine Robson, Councillor Krishna Suresh, Councillor Peymana Assad, Councillor Antonio Weiss and John Higgins as voluntary sector representative. Also joining us virtually this evening are Councillors Marilyn Ashton, Councillor Anjana Patel, Councillor Pritish Patel and Councillor Richard Almond, who are here to ask questions on item 5 on the agenda. 14 months ago, the country went into lockdown and brought the first wave under control, which allowed us all out over the summer. As you will have seen from the Cabinet presentations at Cabinet meetings given by Sean as Chief Executive and Carol, our Director of Public Health, we started seeing increases in infections from September and was at pandemic levels by December, which led to the second countrywide lockdown just before Christmas. The word I use to describe the pressures on services and people is that it has been relentless. This second lockdown has continued for over 5 months, and we have another few weeks to go before we can hopefully start to return to normality. It has been really hard for so many. People are tired, and people are quite rightly concerned about the news and the press about variants of concern and possible new restrictions, or even extending the current restrictions. We have all worked hard to get to this stage where we can look to come out of lockdown by adhering to public health guidance and regular testing, and the vaccination programme is going very well in Harrow. There is the light of hope at the end of a very long tunnel. What we don't want to see is the resurgence and rise in infections across the borough. I would therefore like to propose that item 8, which is our regular COVID-19 update from the Chief Executive, is moved up the agenda and heard after public questions. This will give residents and Cabinet the opportunity to hear from Sean the latest news about the situation in Harrow. Can I ask if that's agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Also tonight on the agenda, we have the accommodation strategy, which went to a recent meeting for pre-scrutiny of the report. And I would like to invite Councillor Sachin Shah, Chair of Scrutiny, and Councillor Stephen Greek, Vice Chair of Scrutiny, to speak briefly on the reference from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in relation to item 11 the accommodation strategy. They will be joining us remotely. So I just noticed Councillor Sachin Shah cannot make this meeting, so it'll just be Councillor Stephen Creek. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Excellent. So we now move on to item 1, which is apologies for absence. I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Adam Swirsky. We now move to item 2, which is declarations of interest. I'll read some out and I think we come back to some. So Councillor Sue Anderson has declared a non-pecuniary interest in item 12 in that she is a councillor for Greenhill Ward, which the report relates to. Councillor Keith Ferry has declared a non-pecuniary interest in item 11 in that he is a board member of the Harrow Strategic Development Partnership, and item 12 in that he is a ward member for Greenhill Ward. Councillor Adam Swirsky had previously submitted a disclosure of pecuniary interest, but he is not here tonight. Councillor Vasya Palmer has a dispensation that her husband works for London Underground. She will remain in the virtual meeting for the duration of these items. For myself, as Councillor Graham Henson, I am the council's representative and also chair of the West London Waste Authority. To avoid any perception of a conflict of interest, I will leave the meeting during item 10, which is the West London Waste Authority food waste funding. And Councillor Natasha Proctor, as deputy leader, will chair the meeting for this item. Can I have any other further declarations of interest? Keith, did you want to add to your?
Yeah, I'm not a board member of the Harrow Strategic Development Partnership as yet, but I have been proposed to be a board member when it is formed. I therefore have declared a non-pecuniary interest in item 11, and had I had the ability to vote at this meeting, I would have abstained.
Thank you, Keith. Can I have any declarations from other members present at the meeting? I don't see any hands raised. So if anyone does become aware of an interest during the meeting, please let me know and we will record it at that time. So we now move on to item 3, which is petitions. A petition has been received from the Sangat Advice Centre on behalf of 12 residents living on Sancroft Road. As the lead petitioner cannot be present for this meeting, I will read the terms of reference on their behalf. And it says, we, the residents of Sancroft Road, Harrow, urgently request the council to take action to make the owner tenant of number 26 Sancroft Road to make the front and back gardens garbage free. For the past 3 years, we've been suffering in silence, but now rats and foxes are running around our streets. So that petition will be forwarded to the relevant corporate director. So are there any other petitions from cabinet members? No. Are there any petitions from councillors present in the virtual meeting or in the physical meeting? No. Are there any petitions from members of the public? No, I haven't been notified of any. This takes us to item 4, which is public questions. We've received 3 public questions and 15 minutes is allowed for this item, so we should get through the 3. The published questions will be taken as read and we'll go straight to the answer and then any supplementary question. So the first question is from Mike Williams. Mike, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. So it was asking about the overage clause to any future sales of council land. The response is the council has a statutory duty under section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 to secure the best consideration reasonably attainable for any land disposals. The inclusion of an overage clause will be considered if deemed necessary to secure best consideration. Did you have a supplementary question, Mike?
Yes, I do. The reason for asking about the overage clause, I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear, it concerns the Vaughan Road car park site, which was sold to a developer for 3.1 million, and 15 months later they have got 2 offers on the table well in excess of 4 million, and the purchaser is also going to have to spend something like £600,000 in terms of funding the contributing to the SIL and the 106 deal. So it does pose the question that when the Vaughan Road car park site was sold, that within 15 months, the developer is able to make well in excess of £1 million profit on that deal. And it does lead a number of us to conclude that the council didn't get best value. And in fact, the residents were sold cheap on this one. Would you like to comment on that?
I can do. This went to Cabinet, I think, in either September or October 2019.
Sorry, before anyone, I have to declare an interest in Vaughan Road car park. Sorry.
Oh, you didn't put your hand up. Oh, yes, you did.
I did.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
You did.
So Councillor Paul Osborne has declared, is it a pecuniary or non-pecuniary? Yes. Physically leave the room, sorry. It is a pecuniary interest in the sense that he lives next to the property. So just wait a moment, Mike.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, so the property went to valuation, I think it was in September 2019. Someone to correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's right.
Yeah, so it went to Cabinet where an assessment was made about value. The offer made was above the market value at that time and was met the clauses that are laid out within legislation around the selling of property. It achieved a higher price because it had planning permission in place. The overage clauses are quite, from my understanding, quite challenging to implement because then you have to take them into account into the selling price and can have a detrimental effect, which is why the response would be that is if deemed necessary to secure best consideration if we thought we were selling it below any sort of land value at the time. So the assessment was made correctly by the assessments made at that time, and land value prices do go up and they do go down.
Yeah, they haven't gone up 25% in 15 months, which is effectively the £1 million which the developer is poised to make. In fact, it'll be in excess of that in 15 months. That's the point.
But you've made your point, and I'm saying what the council did and took due diligence at that time on the sale of that property. And it's like the other properties that we had, out-of-date properties we had that went to auction or going to auction, they're exactly the same. You have a deflated value if you sell with an overage clause.
Yeah,
So
an overage clause would have given us a clawback on this.
Can we move on to item number 2, please, which is from Dittish Rajamvani. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I'm assuming, are you on the call?
He is there as a guest.
Excellent, thank you. So, Varsha, the question is to you, question number 2.
Yep, that's fine, thank you. So, yes, we do take flooding in residential roads seriously, and we have an approach on this on a number of fronts. We maintain the existing council-owned infrastructure by scheduled and responsive cleansing of the more than 20,000 gullies, 63 flood defence structures, and 80 kilometres of the watercourse. And we carry out repairs where required. We record and investigate all flooding incidents and determine possible solutions. This may be replacing defective gully connections or installing additional gully pots. The main problem, however, is generally a lack of capacity in the public surface water system, which is the responsibility of Thames Water. We are in regular contact with Thames Water and are working with them to address the bigger picture. Jitesh, do you have a supplemental? I don't know if he's there. The screen is blank.
Josh, you just sent a message.
Yeah, so despite, yeah, I can't read the whole message. What's the message? Because I can't read all of it.
Mine's not coming up either. I think it might be better if we try and understand what it is, and then we'll send a written answer.
Yeah, I was going to say that maybe we'll get in touch with Jitesh and do it offline through an email. Thank you, Jitesh, for your question.
Thank you. We now move on to question number 3, which is from Miep Galabi. That's to you, Barsha.
Okay, thank you for that. Obviously, social media is not the recommended route to finding out the true facts. I have not had any conversations with anyone about these roads or barriers. I don't believe that Mr. Devine was a councillor. However, to clarify, there are currently no proposals to implement barriers on this road. Do you have a supplemental?
I do.
Yeah.
So we have enjoyed having our normal freedom again, and on my daily walks I've come across the planters dumped in our local parks at their entrances. Considering how much the removal has cost us residents, it would have made sense if you'd done some research and asked the local schools or allotments if they were interested in them, as I know that West Harrow allotments would have liked to have the various planters off West Harrow station. And I don't understand why they just dumped it. They're an eyesore and they will just end up being a rubbish tip.
Okay.
So what are you planning to do with them?
Okay, so with the planters, they're not dumped anywhere. We had the park users who actually came forward and said that they were interested. So many of our parks have benefited from the planters. So, you know, there are there for others to enjoy, obviously. So
have you actually seen what they look like? There's
yes,
nothing
I have.
in them. They're empty and they just got rubbish and dog poo in them. There's nothing there. It's not going to benefit for our parks. And I've used my park for 25 years.
Thank you.
You obviously don't know our area. That's very sad.
I do, and I have been with the planters and
Thank you very much.
Have a look at our parks and make up your mind then.
The question was answered. The park user group.
No, you haven't really answered this. You haven't answered. As usual, you skim over it because you never actually come out and have a look. Thank you.
Now move. I'd now like to invite Sean to present the updates on COVID-19.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just wait for Nikesh to put the presentation up. Hopefully it will be coming up shortly. Thank you, Nikesh. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Cabinet and councillors and members of the public. So this is the presentation to the May Cabinet relating to the COVID-19 update. I think one thing that I would say is that an awful lot has happened over the past few weeks since the update to the April Cabinet. And in many respects, what's happened during that period of time has very much exemplified where we are in terms of COVID. There have been a number of activities and changes which have been very positive for local people and local residents, as there has been greater freedom for people in terms of what they're able to do, and a sense of getting back to an element of normal life. However, at the same time, because of the emergence of a new variant, the actual focus of the council in terms of what we've had to do to respond to that particular challenge has been enormous. And in many respects, although the situation itself in relation to COVID, case levels, etc., is much improved, the council's responsibility and response, both in relation to supporting the easing of lockdown, but in particular because of the new variant, has created a very significant workload and focus as part of the mitigation measures that are necessary to support the overall response to the pandemic. So just in terms of what I'm going to cover today, as usual, I'm just going to give a set of updates in terms of what the position is in relation to COVID in Harrow, where we are in terms of the lockdown exit, what's happening in the council overall in response to this, cover in some detail what's happening in relation to action to tackle the new variant, picking up issues more generally around vaccination, talking about how the exit lockdown will move us into a recovery phase, hopefully over the next few weeks, and also to pick up some issues relating to how the organisation as a whole is able to deal with the overall picture in relation to COVID and what the impact on the organisation is. So in terms of some of the numbers, the good news, continuing some positive messages from the last couple of cabinet meetings, is that overall case levels remain low and broadly stable. They are just over 23 per 100,000 people, and as people know, at the height of the pandemic, it was almost at 1,000 cases per 100,000 people. So case levels are low and stable. We've recently come through step 3 of lockdown easing, which saw indoor hospitality resuming and greater household mixing and general freedom for people to meet friends and family, which has obviously been a very positive step in terms of both businesses in Harrow and our local residents. But the increase in the new variant B1.67.2, which was first identified in India, has led to a strategy of surge vaccination and surge testing being rolled out, both in Harrow and more broadly across a number of boroughs in northwest London, because of the potential challenge that this new variant places, both in terms of impact on individuals who may contract coronavirus, but also potentially in relation to the opportunity, the threat this might bring in terms of the roadmap easing. This sits alongside our approach to generally rolling out vaccination in Harrow, which is going very well. And similarly, we're still hopeful, depending on decisions made by government, that the plans for the next step 4 of lockdown easing on the 21st of June are in place, which will hopefully see a much more general return to normality, albeit there still could be some restrictions in place. So that will be a key part of the process going forward. This next slide just picks up in some more detail for the record, the position in terms of overall case levels, what's happening in terms of levels of testing, what the positivity rate is in terms of Harrow, and what's happening in different age cohorts, so people can see in some detail the number of cases and what that means. So overall, this confirms the broadly positive picture in terms of case levels. Again, just picking up, there was a significant amount of focus from the council to support step 3 of the lockdown easing, particularly working with the hospitality sector to make sure that that was as safe and as effective as possible. And again, I want to sort of positively report, as with step 2, there was excellent cooperation with businesses across Harrow, which has meant there's been a good level of compliance and people have been able to safely enjoy that extra opportunity to return to going out, eating in restaurants and going to the pub, etc. Obviously, as part of this lockdown easing process, council's involved in a number of different ways, including around advice, enforcement and providing the opportunity for people to be tested. And as I said, there's been a major focus on addressing the challenges that the new variant has put in place, and in particular the risk that places for unvaccinated residents. So I do therefore, Chair, just want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about what's happened in terms of surge vaccination and surge testing. There has been a coordinated effort across 5 northwest London boroughs, including Harrow, to accelerate the vaccination process as quickly as possible, and also to increase testing to help contain the spread of the new variant. Some of these measures are national. Second doses have been brought forward from 10 to 11 weeks to 8 weeks, because getting a second vaccination offers significant additional protection against this new variant. Northwest London and Harrow has been given increased number of doses of the vaccine, both to be made available through the primary care and mass vaccination sites at Byron Hall, including, very importantly, because of age cohorts that we're at now, additional Pfizer vaccine. And what this means is hopefully that over the next few weeks that we will be able to vaccinate both first doses and second doses more quickly than previous planned, therefore offering additional protection in Harrow for our most vulnerable residents who may be at risk of hospitalisation or even death as a result of COVID. And there are further plans in place to roll out pop-up vaccination sites across the borough, hopefully in place over the next week or two, which means that there'll be other increased places within which people can become vaccinated, and that we can, tackle the challenge of the new variant by using a faster vaccination process and making sure that we maximise the number of people who have that protection. Sitting alongside the surge vaccination process, there has also been a significant ramping up of PCR testing across the borough. The purpose of this is to identify any spread of the new variant and therefore identifying people who may need to self-isolate, therefore reducing community transmission. And this week there's been a magnificent effort by council staff, schools and our contractor number 8 to effectively offer PCR tests to all secondary age children, college children and their families in order to be able to do this. A lot of this is happening for pupils at school and college on site, and they've also been given PCR test kits for their family. And generally, PCR testing is available at a number of sites in Harrow over the next couple of weeks in order to try and identify a way forward and to really clamp down on finding out whether or not the variant has spread, but also to identify people who need to self-isolate. And that then brings me on as well, Chair, to the fact that as part of this, alongside general efforts in London and in particular in some of the high risk boroughs, to actually make changes to the test and support payment system. People will know that one of the challenges around COVID has been in the fact that many people have found it for very practical reasons, financial reasons, etc., to comply with self-isolation. So we've been looking at the evidence along with other London boroughs, and we've put forward a series of changes to our discretionary self-isolation payment scheme, which means that we are reducing the number of hurdles that people need to jump over, and we're also making the scheme less onerous in terms of qualifying. So therefore, hopefully, significantly increasing the number of people who are able to self-isolate from a financial or practical reason as a result, or if they do test positive. So I think this is a really positive step in being able to increase the opportunity for people to be able to not be financially impacted as a result of self-isolation, because we know that is an ongoing challenge. Also mention as well that as well as the approach around surge vaccination, surge testing, self-isolation payments, general community testing continues across Harrow. We are, along with government guidance, encouraging people, particularly those who go out to work or who are at the house regularly, to get tested at least twice weekly using the lateral flow testing system, and that this has been continued to be agreed to be extended until June with government support and resources. And there are a number of places across the borough and at home and through pharmacies where people can actually get lateral flow test kits. So again, we want to really push hard to encourage people to continue to get tested on a regular basis in order to identify people who may have COVID, because as we know, a third of people who have coronavirus have no symptoms. And I'm pleased as well to say that obviously as part of this process, those councillors who have come to tonight's in-person meeting in the Civic Centre have all taken part in a lateral flow testing process in order to make sure that they had done that before they attended this meeting, which I think is a really strong and positive leadership in terms of the approach that we'd want to encourage everyone to take in Harrow. I just then want to spend just a little bit of time on the general update in terms of vaccination. We know overall that the vaccination programme has gone very well in Harrow. Great work by the GPs in the primary care networks in a number of sites across the borough in the initial focus around the priority groups 1 to 9. We now know that vaccination is available for residents over 30. That continues to be rolled out through the mass vaccination centre. But we also know as well that although there is generally very good vaccine coverage in Harrow, there are a number of our communities who are more vaccine hesitant, including some of our black communities, and also more generally in terms of our residents who are more deprived. So we are working very much with a whole range of community and voluntary organisations in the borough through the Community Champions Fund to highlight and tackle myths and issues, and therefore reducing vaccine hesitancy in order to make sure that we protect residents as much as possible across the borough through the vaccination programme. Chair, I'm sure you and other members present will be pleased to know that I'm not intending to read out this slide, but what this does for the record is highlight, as earlier in this week, the proportion of residents within the different cohorts who have been vaccinated, and you can see that there are some really impressive numbers in here in terms of the number of people who have been vaccinated in different cohorts, but that there is still work to do, and particularly in some of the high risk cohorts, for example around social care staff, and also in terms of some of the younger residents who have had less time to have that vaccine. So it is a job that has been well done, and one that has gone very well, but there is still much work to do and a lot of activity across the council to support that. At the last meeting, I spent more time talking about the next stage of the process in terms of recovery. Some of our work around recovery has been somewhat put on hold over the last couple of weeks, as we've been focusing extensively around the surge testing and the surge vaccination process. But as you can see from the slide, we are still moving towards a situation where we are managing the pandemic in a slightly different way, and that we are needing to focus on a whole range of issues such as the economic challenge, restoration of services within the NHS and social care, looking at how we deal with the fact that children and young people have missed significant parts of their education or have had it done online. And there are some very significant impacts in terms of long-term mental health and long COVID issues that we need to address. So planning for that recovery is absolutely key and forms part of our work going forward. I also spent a little bit of time at the last cabinet meeting picking up on issues relating to organisational capacity and resilience. And there are a number of things that I want to perhaps update the cabinet on this week. So again, each month that goes past, it increases the amount of time that we've been dealing with an emergency situation, 15 months now. And as you said, Chair, on a relentless basis, which is obviously continues to stretch everyone involved. I think in particular, it's important to point out that what we are seeing as lockdown eases and as we're getting back to an element of normality, that actually the demand on council services is increasing rather than decreasing. There are significant increases in demand around adult social care, around children's services, child and adolescent mental health and environment. There is a significant pent-up demand in the system, for example, in such areas as housing, social care, in benefits, etc. So actually, although some of the direct response around the pandemic has eased, that has been more than replaced by some of the broader impacts that we've faced in terms of demand for our services going forward. And clearly we know as the year goes on, as the economy receives less support through government, that there is a potential economic shock. And I also think as well it's worth reflecting that understandably local residents are seeing the world in general come back to normal and are perhaps not necessarily realising the degree to which the council is still very heavily focused on managing a pandemic, very heavily focused in terms of responding to specific asks around testing, vaccination, etc., which are taking up huge amounts of time, and that there is also the challenge in terms of dealing with recovery. So actually managing public expectations in the light of the rising demand is something that is important, that is there, and that we communicate effectively with residents about that overall position in relation to COVID. And similarly, I just wanted to mention as well that there is some good news in terms of hopefully we'll be able to start to bring staff back to the Civic Office through our new collaboration hub that will go live in July, and also that we will hopefully have the opportunity to give staff, many of whom have worked without any significant breaks for the whole of the last year, 15 months, the opportunity to take some well-earned rest over the summer, which is great, but it will also continue to add to some capacity pressures. So that organisational capacity in many respects feels that it's getting more demanding, albeit in a more positive environment as the situation improves. So just in terms of the summary, Chair, you know, a number of things to be positive about. Case levels remain low. The exit roadmap is going in the right direction and continues to progress successfully, and we look forward hopefully to a further easing of lockdown come the 21st of June. There has been very significant concern about the potential impact of the new variant, and that's led to a very significant focus both nationally across North West London in Harrow to put in place a number of measures to address the fact that in Harrow, as in North West London, there are quite a significant number of cases of the variant, which means that we are needing to respond in a particular way. And obviously we are planning for recovery. We are developing as best we can the most resilient situation that we can in respect of the organisation and the workforce, but it's also important to reflect that COVID will continue to dominate the council's work and priorities for many months ahead. Chair, there is for the record as well a slide at the end which talks about the expenditure that the council's undertaking on the test and trace. The testing programme, which is funded through government, but it is part of the record seeking Cabinet's approval for that in response to this particular presentation. So hopefully that covers the general situation and where we are on a number of specific matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Did we want to move to slide 15? So we have one hand up, Phil.
Yeah, thanks very much, Graham. Thanks very much for the comprehensive update as ever, Sean. Yeah, my particular questions around the surge testing at secondary schools, colleges and families of pupils. Can you update the Cabinet on the progress of that? We set quite an ambitious plan to try and get all those tests done, or those schools covered by half term. And can you give us an update on the number of positive tests that have come back to date from those tests? Thanks.
Graham, would it be okay if I asked Charlie Stewart to answer this question, as he has been most closely involved in coordinating this particular programme?
Of course. Charlie's just joining now.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yes, I did send out details to all councillors of the latest updates. We are now 3 days into the 5-day testing programme and online to hit our targets. I haven't got the details actually in front of me, but I can pull them up if you wish. Somewhere in the region of 30,000 tests have been sent out to date, and the region of 9,000 tests done in schools, which is quite an incredible achievement, I think, by the team and by the contractor. In fact, DHSC was said that we've done in 3 days what others have taken 3 weeks to do. We will have been completed, and we're on track to do so, all secondary schools and colleges by Friday, and have captured probably around 70 to 75% of all pupils in that. To date, we've had just over 560 home test kits returned, and I would impress upon all councillors, please, and anyone that's listening to this, that if they have a home test kit sent home by the school, please do test and return it to the school as soon as possible. That is critical. So we're well on the way. At the moment in time, the actual number of positive tests are just starting to trickle in. If our Director of Public Health is on the line, she may well be able to give a more immediate update, but as of yesterday, we only had a couple of positive tests. However, it is very early days and we're starting to track the numbers coming back through. We do not get the results of whether the tests have been sequenced for the variant first discovered in India for a couple of weeks, so we're not expecting to see those results immediately.
Thank you very much indeed for that answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Is there any other questions? Christine.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question. Since this is being publicly recorded, I just wanted to say again, thank you to Charlie and his team for the astonishing work they've done this week, and also a public call out of thank you to the schools who have coped with this, which dropped on us out of the blue. And within, I don't know, 10 minutes of having got the news that we were going to have to do this, there was already a plan being pulled together, and the schools and the teachers have been extraordinary in doing this. And the team, something 8, what are they called? I can't remember what they're called.
Number 8.
Number 8, yeah. They have also been fantastic. They joined us to talk to the heads of schools in advance to explain how this was going to work, and everybody's just done their absolute best. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments anyone wishes to make? I can't see any hands up. Once again, Sean and team, because it is a team effort really, that for the work that's been done around this. We need to make sure we get it right, otherwise we'll be having an extended lockdown and the concerns that brings with it. But as people have said, you know, it's a remarkable effort to with everything else that is going on, to actually mobilise so quickly to get these tests underway. And hopefully then we can sort of, if everyone still follows the Public Health England guidance, then we should be able to control the spread of the virus in Harrow, and we can have a nice summer ahead. So the recommendation is, can Cabinet note the presentation which is set out in the published second supplementary pack, and authorise the payments for community and surge testing funded by the government. Are they all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 5, which is councillor questions. We've got 9 questions have received in 15 minutes will be allowed. The published questions will be taken as read, and we'll go straight to the answer, and then any supplementary questions. So first question is from Marilyn. Marilyn, are you on the call, Marilyn?
Yes. Hello.
Good evening.
Hi.
So the response is, it is proposed that the Planning Policy Working Group will meet by late June, early July, subject to member availability. The Local Development Plan is starting its journey through the system in October 21 and is targeted for completion by the end of 23. The review will respond to the recently published London Plan, including the increased housing target that have been given to us of 802 homes per year, and also the policies relating to small sites and tall buildings. Evidence-based work in relation to these matters has already commenced, noting that any policies need to be based on evidence. Did you have a supplementary question, Marilyn?
Yes, thank you for that. Well, I more or less knew what you were going to say before you answered the question, and I accept all that, although I do think that it's important that we have a lot more transparency around what we're doing on policy. But the concern is this, that we won't actually have adopted our new core strategy until the end of 2023. And we are, in my view, at very great risk, particularly in our suburbs, of not being able to sustain any objection that we have at appeal, any refusal at appeal, particularly in our suburbs, of inappropriate development. And the problem is that we have a site allocation policy that was adopted in 2013. We have a core strategy that was adopted in 2012. And both of those documents now are obsolete and have been superseded by the new London Plan. And so there are other boroughs doing this, and we're actually sharing a supplementary planning document with Barnet Council at the moment, whereby they're actually doing an appraisal of the Edgware district centre, and of course we share that with them because it goes across the road into Harrow. And we had a briefing on this the other day. It's quite helpful.
Did you have a question, Marilyn?
Yes, I do, and I will come to that question. Do you not think it's a little odd that we're actually engaged, although it's not our initiative, and I think this is the nub of the matter, that we're actually engaged in writing a supplementary planning document to set out to future developers and partners the kind of development we want to see in Edgware District Centre. And that we've actually added, thanks to James Lee, who was very supportive at this briefing that we had, some words to protect the character of the area on our side of the road of Edgware District Centre. I think the point I'm trying to make is, why can't we do that in other areas? It doesn't take away from the work we're doing on the actual core strategy.
Did you have a question, Marilyn?
Yes, I do have a question, but I think it's important that people watching this and that you, in order to answer the question, understand the background to it. The question is it that you don't want to do the piece of work to protect our suburbs from inappropriate development? Because you see, I think that's what it is. Or is it that you're just saying we can't, when in actual fact that can't possibly be right, because we are sharing exactly that with another borough as we sit here and speak? So which is it? Is it that we can't, because that's obviously not true? Or is it that this administration, under your leadership, you're in charge of planning policy, simply doesn't want to? And that would then therefore be a political decision.
A number of the points you made are incorrect. If it is an inappropriate application, it would be rejected because the plan would set that out, as it currently does. The plan is being developed, and at the moment it's currently collecting the evidence in order to go out to initial consultation, which starts in September, October this year, and that is set out by legislation, and you should know that. The part around an SPD in Barnet, if you look at it, it fits in with the borough plan in Harrow. So all the buildings in Edgware is because their borough plan does not set that out as much as it does within the Harrow borough plan, and that's all been set out. You regularly talk about trying to the council delivering a supplementary planning document to set out height, and as we've repeatedly told you, this is factually incorrect. If you look at the local government lawyer, which is paid for by the local government association, they set out quite clearly that a supplementary document cannot set out new policy within a plan. And the reason is because the local plan goes out to wide consultation, not once, I think it goes out nearly 3 times altogether, and it needs Secretary of State sign-off. To introduce a policy that you cannot introduce a policy that undermines the borough plan for the simple reason it hasn't had that wide consultation. It also doesn't take into consideration, and you should know this, it doesn't take into consideration the housing target that's been set, which is incorporated within the current borough plan. If you looked at our borough plan at the moment, it sets out about inappropriate heights and allocations, and it was successfully used in the rejection of an application in Vaughan Road just recently. So you're incorrect on a number of points, which surprises me of someone who's been on the planning committee so long, that you're repeatedly going against the advice that's been set out. And if you want to look at other boroughs, all these other boroughs that are set out, it is because they did not set out the tall building policy in the way we have within the Harrow plan. So thank you very much, Marilyn. We'll now move on to question number 2. And the question number 2 is also from you, Marilyn, and it
I need to leave the room for this question, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Paul Osborne has a pecuniary interest in question number 2. We'll just wait for Paul to vacate the building. He's getting a lot of exercise tonight.
I don't think he's going to be vacating the building somehow, but he might be leaving the council chamber.
Right, so the answer is question number 2 is Thank you very much, Marion, for the question. And as you're aware, because it's similar to the question that was raised earlier on from the public questions. And as you're aware, the decision to sell Vaughan Road car park was taken at Cabinet in September 29, having reviewed 4 options for the property, which was set out in the report. To remind you, the council received an offer for the property which exceeded the value stated in an independent valuation of the site. Evidently, this satisfied the legal requirements to achieve best consideration for the site. The imposition of any covenants or overage clauses would have depressed the purchase price, as the purchaser would have to factor those into any offer made. Did you have a supplementary question, Mary?
Yes, I do. With all due respect to you, Councillor Henson, leader, I think you've lost the plot. We can happily and cheerfully refuse any application, even on Vaughan Road. And that was an officer's recommendation for refusal, and quite rightly so. But the point is, we have to be able to win an appeal. If these applications are appealed, we have to be able to win. And if we don't refresh our policies, if we don't at least do something in the interim period to put a little bit more meat on the bone on our policies, which encourage very high-rise buildings all over the borough, then we are going to flounder. So the point is about Vaughan Road is that the council gave itself permission for a massive 8-storey high building. It didn't have to, but it did. Then it sold it without going to auction for less than, in my view, it should have been worth, to somebody that was an associate of Councillor Ferry. And then we shouldn't have been surprised that we ended up with an application for 4 more stories than what we gave ourselves permission for. And this is a terrible mess that you as leader and your administration have created. And you've let down the people of West Harrow really badly. The question is, why is it you will never admit when you get something wrong? You will never ever see the point of view that anyone's trying to make. And to belittle me in the way you have, when you know damn well that I'm talking sense, is extremely insulting. And anybody watching this will be able to follow what I'm saying and play this back. And I think they'll realise that you're just not being honest with people about all the things that you're getting wrong. And if we end up with massive tower blocks in our suburbs, ruining the character of this borough, they'll only have the Labour Party in Harrow to blame. Are you going to be honest about this and say you've got it all wrong? Or are you still going to come back with an answer that undermines me, that is highly offensive, and that is completely wrong?
Well, firstly, Marion, I didn't realise you were an expert valuer as well, but because we had a valuation report brought in by an expert, as I just said, and that was reported back through the Cabinet. This is, officers cannot bring those things forward under the Local Government Act, as you are fully aware, unless it meets those true value clauses. And so the valuation came in and the offer came in above the valuation price. And so the council did follow due diligence. Also within the report, the local ward councillors put in provisos on part of the sale that to make sure that we included in the future any application around parking provision, height and massing, architectural character of the development, greenery and planting, safety and security concerns surrounding existing underpass. And that's all within the Cabinet reports, and that is what was agreed. What is of concern to me, actually, is the legislation that's been coming through around planning from the government. And if the plans that are coming out are quite disgraceful in my view. The way that it's going to put into zonal applications and give take away from local decision making around planning is something we will be resisting at full so far as we can. The issue that you talk around about planning, I've got great respect for the planning officers in this council. I think they're very highly qualified in what they do. They make a very unbiased consideration of the reasoning of either if it's acceptance or refusal. And then on larger schemes, the councillors either support that or they don't. And if they don't, which is what has happened in the past, then we have to bring an independent person if they go to an appeal. So this is a very highly regulated area with very highly qualified people who do this as their job in a full-time role, and they're the ones who advise us on what we need to do. So as I say, my biggest concern is the planning legislation that has been implemented already and is also coming through the white paper which was announced in the Queen's speech, and it's all a public record. Thank you very much. Now moved on to question number 3, which is your question to Councillor Paymana Assad.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Ashton, for your very important question. In order to be very transparent as I possibly can about my strategy, I'd like to let you know that last week, in light of the violence in both Israel and Palestine, I requested a contact list of all the Jewish community leaders and synagogues in the borough from officers after the reports of the rise of anti-Semitic incidents in London. I knew that there was a need to show solidarity with the Jewish community, to make sure that they knew we stood shoulder to shoulder with them and that we have a zero tolerance approach towards anti-Semitic hatred. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get access to that contact list due to GDPR rules, so I couldn't write directly to the Jewish community leaders as quickly as I wanted. However, council officers very kindly found another way around for me to get that message of solidarity out. So as you state in your question, on Friday the 21st of May, I was able to issue a statement of solidarity that went to all community leaders in Harrow, where I made it explicitly clear that the council was concerned about the rise of anti-Semitic hatred and that we wanted all of our Jewish brothers and sisters to know that we stand with them in solidarity and that we would take a zero tolerance approach to any hate directed at our Jewish community. Further to this, I made it very clear in my statement that I condemn all forms of violence taking place in both Israel and Palestine. And in line with that statement, last week the council spoke to the police and asked for increased visible presence. We have also asked our COVID marshals to continue to be out in the borough and offer reassurance to our Jewish residents. We've also spoken to the Community Security Trust in regards to these anti-Semitic incidents, and so far nothing's been reported in Harrow during the last few weeks, but we aren't taking anything for granted and will continue to be in touch with them. These are some of the initial bits of action that we've been able to take to show solidarity with the Jewish community. In regards to my strategy going forwards, as a first, we've built good established relationship with Jewish community leaders and synagogues over the last few years, over a long time. And so this has allowed us to liaise and coordinate with them if needed. And I'm confident that we'll continue to link in with these different community leaders as needed and able to get in touch with them on live updates directly from the Jewish community. Should anything happen, we can identify, stop or react in a proper manner. So I'll continue to make sure that we reach out to those communities to show our support and be clear that the violence in Israel and Palestine should not impact community relations in Harrow. Secondly, I will be following up on my request to write directly to all Jewish community leaders and offer a meeting to listen to their concerns, should that be what they want and need. This will take some time as I gather the consent before I can do this. Thirdly, I have reached out to the Nissan Nisham network, a network of Jewish and Muslim women in Harrow, working on community relations and fostering a better understanding. Now, they've told me they have a campaign called #Language of Sisterhood, asking those who speak on the issue of Israel and Palestine to reject the use of divisive language that causes division and hatred and instead promote respectful and unifying words to build better understanding. I've joined this campaign and will be promoting this Salam Shalom to help with this. Fourth, the council will continue to take part in the London Prevent Network to monitor anti-Semitic and other forms of hate crime. These reports come directly to us from SO15 or the Counter-Terrorism Command Unit, as well as the Home Office. We'll also be linking in with other London boroughs so that we are very aware that this is a live issue and we'll take it very seriously. And lastly, we will be making sure that we promote educational material on the subject of anti-Semitism so that we can make sure young people do not take part in such language or violence. To that end, we'll be sharing details of an organisation called Solutions Not Sides, and with it a guide on hate speech with schools in the borough to make sure that schools can take advantage of this to help us spread awareness about this kind of thinking and behaviour. Lastly, I just want to say I think this is an issue that needs a cross-party approach, removing the politics from it, because it's an issue of unity in our communities. And therefore, I'd be very happy to work with you, Councillor Ashton, and any other councillors to identify what more can be done to support not just the Jewish community, but all other communities. and I will continue to liaise with officers to make sure that our communities are shown support during this time. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do actually. I mean, that's really impressive, and thank you very much for such a lengthy reply. I mean, I think it's wrong to say we haven't had a problem in Harrow, though. I mean, there's been loads of graffiti daubed all over Pinner Gardens. There's been problems with people having the mezuzahs torn off their front doors. Jewish men are frightened to go out wearing their kippah for fear of being beaten up. And frankly, the Jewish community is living in fear at the moment. I think the point to make is this, and this might help you understand this better, because I don't think we really do, with respect. Anti-Semitism is not related to the problems between Israel and the Palestinian people. It is more related to a visceral hatred of Jewish people. And of course, people jump on the bandwagon of what's going on in the Middle East to make a good excuse to have a go at the Jewish people. But it's nothing new, and it's been going on for a long time. And as you know, the history of my people, I'm Jewish myself, you know, the Holocaust, etc. It is something that's not new. And I think it's very important to understand that, because if you don't understand that, then you're not going to get this right. And I've been actually keeping a dossier of your tweets, which I won't go into because it will be very embarrassing for you. But suffice it to say, what you've just said in public is excellent, and we're very much welcomed. But it's not really matched with what you really think. And I think you perhaps need to dial back a little bit on your social media content, and try a little bit harder to perhaps have a more even-handed approach in future. Would you not agree with that?
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. I've made it very clear on my Twitter page that the views expressed are my own and not of official council policy. Further, I have tweeted, and I quote, Harrow Council will take a zero-tolerance approach to anti-Semitic hate targeted at our Jewish community. Blaming Jewish people for violence in Israel and Palestine is unacceptable. Our unity is our strength. We want to keep our communities united and protected from all hate. I have had numerous messages of support from local Conservative Party members and activists regarding my tweets, and I would like to say that I think it's very divisive to assume that when someone speaks about the crimes committed against Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories, crimes that are recognized by the United Nations as well as Human Rights Watch, that somehow one automatically becomes anti-Israel or anti-Jewish. It is simply not the case and simply not true. And therefore, I would agree with you when you say that the hatred towards Jews is not new, and you know it's been around for a very long time, and that people jump on a bandwagon. But world events do lead to anti-Semitic incidents increasing. So speaking up for the human rights of one group should never be seen as being anti another group. This drags us into us versus them narratives, Councillor Ashton, which is very dangerous and harmful for community cohesion. It pits people against one another and makes unhelpful and harmful accusations that harm relations, which I believe you've just done so. As I pointed out earlier, this type of language is divisive and does not foster unity and togetherness, which is why I joined the campaign for Salam Shalom for Nisa Nashim, a local group of Jewish and Muslim women trying to foster better relations and understanding. I urge you to join us. I would also urge you and others to go and read one of my speeches that I gave in November 2019 at the Pinner Synagogue. You can find that on my Twitter page too. To a room full of 300 Jewish worshippers from Harrow, about how I believe and why I believe and how I believe that Israel's right to exist is true as a practicing Muslim. I grew up with this belief and continue to believe that Jewish people have the right to exist, but I also understand and know that this same right extends to Palestinians. Further to this, I would be very happy to join you and others at any local synagogue in Harrow to reassure our community in person. I feel very sad when I hear that people are living in fear and that there have been anti-Semitic hate crimes in Pinner Gardens or on people's doors, and that people don't feel safe wearing their kippah down the street. That makes me I'm very, very sad because it's a very personal issue to me too. Last week, my brother was a target of a hate crime, and the individual who targeted him shouted anti-Semitic hate. He did not know that my brother was a Muslim. He did not know anything about my brother, but assumed that he was Jewish, walking down the street near Hammersmith Station. And so this issue is very close to my heart because it impacts all of us. And so I hope that you would extend the same type of solidarity as well, Councillor Ashton. Thank you very much.
Oh dear.
Thank you very much. We now move on to question number. Actually, I just noticed the time. We're 5 minutes over our 15 minutes. We've been running for 20 minutes. Can we look to try and keep the questions and answers short, please? We move on to question number 4 from Councillor Anjana Patel, which is to Varsha.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the response is various checks had been carried out. Unfortunately, this error was missed and we corrected it on the website, but found residents still had many queries. So we reprinted and sent out the calendars to every household, which is more than 69,000 properties at the cost of £30,000, which equates to about 43p per calendar for printing and postage. Do you have a supplemental, Anjana?
Yes, I do. You didn't actually give the figure. You said multiply. I expected to actually give me a figure. Anyway,
30,000, I said.
£30,000 is cost to put this mistake correct. Okay. My supplementary question is to you, Varsha. Not only Councillor Palmer, not only have we thoroughly confused our customers by sending them an incorrect bin collection schedule, but we have also sent out by post a correct version to households in flats who are on a different schedule, thereby causing even more confusion. What a waste of taxpayers' money. Are you going to apologize for this, or are you once again going to blame everyone else but yourself for council's incompetence?
Well, thank you, Councillor Patel. I'm sure you are super perfect and have never made a mistake in your life, because we are all humans and we can make a mistake, and we have rectified it. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
So no apology as usual, right? And don't tell me.
We make mistakes.
Can you stop, please? We're now moving on to question number 5, which is from Councillor Pritesh Patel. Is Pritesh then? Yes, he is. Cool. Do we agree the scope of the redevelopment of the depot at Forward Drive has changed significantly? And the response is that the scope of the redevelopment of the depot is unchanged since it was agreed by Cabinet in July 2018. As you would note from the report on the agenda tonight, it's now proposed that the council should occupy the building in its entirety, and as with any tenant, a category B fit out, which is the fittings of and furniture, is required. Pritesh, did you have a supplementary question?
I do have a supplementary. Just to get the facts straight, the depot redevelopment at Forward Drive was approved by Cabinet in 2017 with an original budget of 5.8 million. The budget today stands at 33.9 million. So don't you dare tell me that there has been no changes in this particular development. It's simply not true. The original scope of the depot was to maximize commercial opportunities at the site. That plan, as you know, is now in tatters, and despite what you tell us, comes at a significant cost to the council. The revised plan for the depot will now mean that a large number of staff who previously worked at Civic Centre will now be working from the depot. This will have a huge impact on local residents in the area, including increase in traffic congestion, parking problems, and so on. The plans for the Harrow New Civic have also changed significantly and will have far-reaching implications for many of Harrow's residents in the way they interact, access to council services, especially with the introduction of satellite sites. I do not believe that any meaningful consultation has taken place since these new changes. Do you not owe it to the people of Harrow to conduct a more extensive and far-reaching consultation in light of these significant changes? I am very, very concerned that the council is once again pushing through developments without full and proper consultation.
You've raised a number of points throughout this, and the original depot development was for 3 stories, and in July 2018, when I said about it, it was improved up to the 5 stories with 2 vacant stories on the building, and that's also set out within the accommodation report, which is on the agenda tonight. This went through wide consultation going back to 2014, and it has been through a number of workshops and spaces. The staff have been consulted around a number of options that are available, and it just seems to be, well, it's making better use of the assets we've got, and the full detail of that is in the accommodation strategy, so I don't want to read it all out now.
How about you consult the residents that are affected by this or will be affected by this?
The residents were originally consulted about the move to the Civic Centre site to Wheelstone a number of years ago, and that has not changed.
That's changed.
We'll now move on to question number 6, which is to Councillor Natasha Proctor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Patel, for your question. Waits are obliged by the terms of the members' agreement to match the council's land value and to provide sufficient additional cash equity, which when matched by the council will enable the partnership to borrow from the market to deliver the scheme. In the present business plan, which is scheduled to be agreed by Cabinet on 1st of July, that amounts to 38.430 million. The partnership is owned 50-50 by the council and Waits, and each is obliged to match the other. The council contribution is land and cash, matched by Waits cash resources. Do you have a supplementary?
I do have a supplementary. The council's own documents say that they will be investing a total of 48.69 million over a 12-year period, not only to finance HSDP, but also HNC and Poets Corner developments. Firstly, I'd like to ask you, how will you fund the development of Poets Corner and maintain cost neutrality that you will be considering that you will be wiring out approximately 8.4 million from the Poets Corner capital program budget to be used to fit out the depot? And secondly, how will you account for the cost of fit out of HNC and potential cost of settling contractual issues with the developer in the total budget?
Again, as has been mentioned by Councillor, by our leader, we are going to be coming back to the accommodation strategy in more detail in further reports. But part of the programme for this is to make funding savings in the future developments of what the new building will be continue for us in the different ways it's going to be saving money by making it more efficient and in other ways. So there are savings to be made in that will then be able to be used for things. But like I say, there's going to be more details on this in further reports, and I'll be able to come back to you with further details in the future.
Is it fair to say that the figures mentioned in the report are totally finger in the air jobs then?
We'll come back on more details in the future. Thank you, Councillor.
That's a yes then, I guess.
Stop. We're now at 30 minutes for question time, but just take one more, I think. British, did you want to ask question number 7?
Yes, please. Can you advise whether the financial statement of accounts for 2019-20 has been signed off by our auditors, Mazars?
Thank you for this question as well. The latest update we've had from Mazars is that the audit of the 2019-20 financial statements is ongoing. The Mazars team are aiming to complete this as soon as possible in the coming weeks. Nothing has arisen in their work since their report to GARM's committee in October 2020 that would indicate material errors in the accounts. The auditors anticipate issuing an unqualified opinion on the financial statement still.
If I may ask a supplementary, this has been going on for quite some time now, with the auditors not signing off the accounts. Are you able to specify a clear sign-off date, cut-off date, and assure the council that we will not incur any penalties for late filing?
Yes, the issue isn't a specific issue to Harrow. There's auditors having problems across the entire capital at the moment with this, and it isn't just Mazars, it's other audit companies as well. This is from a combination of a variety of factors, including staff issues and the quality issues this arises from those staffing problems. But like I say, external audit companies are having these issues across London, so it's not specific to Harrow, and all audit companies are in the same boat. So there's no real room there for any of them.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor.
We have 2 questions left. We've been running for 35 minutes so far. If they'd be quick, we could respond to them. Richard, did you want to?
My questions are always to the point, but the answers aren't always. Is the council going to push Harrow up the league table of councils for central government funding? To Councillor Proctor.
Thank you, Councillor Almond. I'll try and do this quickly, but there's obviously quite a bit to be said on having a fairer funding review for all councils, not just for Harrow. But thank you for this question. And as I say, I'm sure that you were all as disappointed as we were that there was no mention of the fairer funding review or the funding or services for adult social care in the Queen's speech that we just had, despite it being promised to everybody and it being in this government's manifesto. In terms of Harrow, with the exception of specific grant funding streams that have come with their own specific criteria, the main source of central funding is the revenue support grant. Harrow's RSG is now only 1.5 million, which is not even sufficient to fund 1% of the council's current budget required to meet the needs of the borough. And as you know, Harrow remains one of the lowest funded councils both within London and nationally. To mitigate this, both officers and members are linked into numerous lobbying forums to continue pushing the message to the Treasury and to the MHCLG that Harrow is structurally underfunded and the current formulaic approach to local government funding has fallen woefully out of date to meet the needs of our borough. This underlying structural shortfall is pushing the burden of supporting needs of the council taxpayer, with Harrow being forced to rely on council tax to fund over 75% of our budget requirements, a fact that's reported to MHCLG on various occasions. Throughout the COVID pandemic, the leader, my predecessor, the chief executive, the director of finance have all had ongoing dialogues with MHCLG to evidence the extremely challenging financial sustainability issues that the councils face. And the current funding mechanism just does not capture what is going on, as you know, at a grassroots level for what our residents and people of Harrow can feel. This has resulted in April of this year, MHCLG confirming that they have started a piece of work to understand the implications of different reforms for Harrow and other LAs so that they can be clear about what the different options are with the ministers. The council is doing everything it can to get its point across, but this government needs to do their bit by listening to what we're saying and taking action. Everybody knows that local governments everywhere have been assured of a fairer funding review, a multi-year funding settlement and a green paper for social care, but for some time now nothing has materialised. Harrow's demographics have changed substantially over the last 60 years, but until the ways in which we're funded are also changed and the out-of-date funding formula is stopped being rolled forward year on year, they need to listen to us and we need people in government to hear what we're saying to them.
Well, can I congratulate you first on very quickly mastering Councillor Swirsky's technique, both to Councillor Patel and me, of not answering the question we put to you, but the question you would have liked us to put to you. I wasn't asking about the quantum of funding. I was asking about how you were going to get us to leapfrog other councils in the league table, because this year in your revenue budget, as in all recent years, there were repeated references to our being one of the lowest funded councils in London and nationally. If you're not going to get other councils to agree some way or other to let us leapfrog them, this perpetual whinge about us being low in the league table is utterly irrelevant, because even if RSG funding doubled tomorrow, we would still be towards the bottom of the league table. So unless you're going to give me some answer to that about some strategy the council has to get us to leapfrog other councils, would you make sure that in future budget documents there is no reference to our being a lower funded council, because it's utterly irrelevant?
Well, I did answer your question about what we've been doing. I explained all of the people that are in charge of finances at this council have been having conversations with government ministers. But I will go back to my point. It's not about Harrow leapfrogging other boroughs to get better funding. No, it's not. No, it's not. There's lots of boroughs that are underfunded by this government. It's not just us, but we are especially hard done by and have been for years. And our council are working hard to change that. It's about everybody having fairer funding, especially Harrow, because we're so low funded. But it's not about us benefiting at the expense of other people that need to be funded as well. Everybody needs to be looked after by this government. And I would say, you know, I'd welcome from my own MP, Bob Blackman, to talk to his friends in government to make sure that we get better funding as well, Richard. It's not just up to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Natasha. Richard, as you're here, we'll take your last question.
Thank you very much. What do you consider needs to happen for councillors to be able to hold actual rather than virtual meetings?
Well, Richard, I know you're not with us tonight, but I'm sure you'll be delighted to see we are actually holding a physical meeting tonight.
No, you're not.
We are, and
this is a hybrid meeting. It's not an actual meeting.
Richard, under legislation, this is an actual meeting, and I'm sure you'll be delighted to see we are holding this actual meeting tonight, and a number of council meetings have been scheduled in both June and July. Although virtual meetings have been stopped by government, we do still come under COVID regulations, which controls the number of people gathering indoors in a safe manner. And until there is any change to social distancing and building safety rules, which is unlikely to happen before July, there are many practical barriers to in-person meetings. I'm also conscious that many residents like joining online from their own home, so we have set these up as hybrid style meetings. And it is a physical meeting. The only people allowed to vote tonight are the people who are currently present in the Civic Centre, which is 4 councillors. To help slow the spread of COVID, we are strongly encouraging residents and members to take part and view these online rather than coming to the meeting itself. But if they wish to attend in person, we have to ensure that it is safe to do so, and we are encouraging all those attending meetings to take a COVID test beforehand. By September, everyone should have had the opportunity to be fully vaccinated, and this will build member and public confidence to hold in-person meetings more fully again. And that is one of the reasons why we moved a July cabinet meeting to later this year, to ensure that we can do that in this very safe and COVID friendly way. Do you have a supplementary question, Richard?
Yes, your answer, Mr. Leader, was theory, not practice. Your own council document tonight, paragraph 2.38 on the accommodation strategy, doesn't pretend that this is an actual meeting. It refers to you're having a mixture of virtual and hybrid meetings up to September 21. You give us nothing in any detail at all about what's going to happen after that. Whenever this question has been raised in the past year, you have claimed that you're gagging, if I can use a crude term, to get back to meetings when we will all be present. And yet this matter keeps getting kicked off, so far as I can see, into the long grass, because there's an administration, I suspect it suits you perfectly well to have these meetings where question and answer sessions are mannered and stilted. We have no proper debate or exchange going back and forth as you do when everybody's present in a chamber together, and that therefore makes the administration's job that much easier, but our job as an opposition that much more difficult. So will you accept that what you've said to me so far is not reflective of the reality, it's a pretense, and would you tell us when you're going to get us back in together to have proper meetings when we can all meet and debate properly?
Richard, if you want to see reality, I'd urge you to look through the presentation that was made by the Chief Executive earlier on, and that have been made over the last year. Over 760 Harrow residents have died during COVID, and that's even with the regulations that are in place that brought in virtual meetings and stopped the physical meetings because the regulations said we could not hold them. The point that's moved on from that is that the COVID variants of concern are still growing across London. We know that from the reports that we see on the TV and the Secretary of State announces on the press conferences. The legislation to hold virtual meetings in this entirety was stopped. It was not renewed, which means we have to go to physical meetings, which is why Cabinet is sitting here with 4 Cabinet members when the quorum is 3, to ensure that we can sit here in a COVID compliant way and the decisions can be made in accordance with the legislation that is there. We've set it up as a hybrid meeting so other members can participate. If you look at the planning meetings that are coming up, they're being held in a very large venue, so the whole committee has to be present at that place, and it is costing us money to do so. If we could have seen forward in time, we would have probably, I think as Harrow, we have done exceptionally well in the way we've managed the pandemic. And I think the actual meetings have given more access to people to decision-making processes because they haven't got to come to the Civic Centre. They can log in and ask the questions. And so I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. belongs the vaccination programme works as well as it should do, and it's been advanced, so hopefully by people, instead of 12-week wait, you get it in 8 weeks, and people partake in the vaccination programme. Belongs people carry on with the test and trace systems that are underway and the surge testing that is underway at the moment, and we can bring the COVID pandemic under control. Then by September we should be able to open up to fully to proper face-to-face meetings. But having said that, I still think there's a space now for some meetings to be held online where decisions are not being made, and that has been my view the whole time, and I haven't changed it. And I get that from the legislation that's in place and the advice we get from our public health professionals through Carol's team, through Professor Fenton, through Public Health England, and also through the NHS. All of it ties up to says, do not meet in public at this moment in time because it's unsafe. So thank you. That actually completes the cabinet questions.
Thank you for taking the ball anyway.
Yeah, it's overrun by 25 minutes, so I'm going to get into trouble now, but still. We now move on to item number 6, which is the key decision schedule, May to July 21. Can people note that the Treasury Management shared service arrangement with the Greater London Authority? Oh, sorry, Christine, I didn't see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm very sorry. I just feel that for the sake, for you as Chair and for the people here taking part of this meeting and for those who may view it online, I need to make an apology. I have listened to all the proceedings, but for, I don't know, about 10 minutes or so, I had a crisis with my iPad, which is what I use to actually get the text of Cabinet. So even though my camera was on, and I was listening, I wasn't actually on screen. So just in case somebody thought I was being disrespectful, I just felt I needed to apologise. Thank you very much.
Nice to see you, Christine. Thank you. So that point's noted in the minutes. We haven't made any decisions yet. So we're going to the key decision schedule. So can people note that the Treasury Management shared service arrangements with GLA has been deferred to the June Cabinet meeting. On that basis, can Cabinet note the updated key decision schedule, which is on page 7 to 16?
Note.
Oh, excellent, thank you. Progress on scrutiny projects. Can Cabinet note the updates on page 17 and 18?
Noted.
Agreed, thank you. That now moves us to item number 9, which is renewal of the Wealdstone Selective Licensing Scheme, which is on pages 19 to 94. And can I ask Paimana to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report proposes the reintroduction of a selective licensing scheme in the ward of Wealdstone for a period of 5 years. It would require private rented accommodation to be licensed and meet conditions in order to address significant and persistent problems with antisocial behaviour in Wealdstone ward. This scheme allows us to make sure that homes are assessed and safe for living and meet at the very least basic needs. But we can also act against cases of nuisance, fly tipping, antisocial behaviour and other activities. So far, the licensing agreement in Wealdstone has made a huge difference as it has been in place for 5 years. It's helped bring down cases of overcrowding, antisocial behaviour, damp and disrepairs and abandoned vehicles. All of this has helped lead to a more stable community. The scheme also allowed us to get better standards in private rented accommodation, allowing and renewing it would allow the council to take further action and cover more private rented accommodation that has fallen through the net. The current licence runs out on the 31st of May, and should it be renewed by Cabinet, it would come into effect on the 2nd of September. In line with guidelines, we will put in place a 3-month communication plan from June to make sure all landlords understand the rules and apply for licensing on time. Enforcement officers will be out in the community to make sure this message is heard. As a Labour administration, we understand the impact of COVID-19 and therefore have provided breathing space from June to September to homeowners so that they have time to get things in order before we apply the rules once again. We have consulted with the community, landlords and others on the renewal of this scheme in Wealdstone, and all are fully in favour of this continuing. The scheme is well known and has been in place for the last 5 years, so landlords know about the licensing fee, but we will make sure enforcement officers reiterate the rules through our communication. This is exactly what residents in the borough want and need, because not only will we be bringing up the standards in the private rented sector, it will also help us address homelessness and emergency accommodation, but also tackle antisocial behaviour. This is a targeted approach that puts residents of Wealdstone first, and I ask Cabinet to approve the implementations of the recommendations so that we can continue to make a difference to the lives of residents in Wealdstone. But I also do have some additional changes to the recommendations in the report. May I outline these, please, Chair?
If you could, in some sense.
Okay, the additional line to add to recommendation number 4 in the selective licensing report at the end would be including easily accessible information on the council website and then linking the harrow.gov.uk/licensing link. The change to recommendation number 6 in the selective licensing report would be delegate authority to the corporate director community following consultation with the portfolio holder for community cohesion, crime and enforcement and removing environment. Thank you.
I'm just looking at the report. Excellent. Is there any questions? Thank you, Paymana. It's not sort of asking us to change policy, so okay. Phil, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, it was rather a comment as a councillor for Wealdstone Ward. As Councillor Assad said, there has been a much improvement in the environment around Wealdstone, but I think there is still quite a lot to do on this area, as many other residents across the borough shows. But I do fully support that, and I also fully support that the people in Wealdstone need a decent place to live. And this is part of our armoury to tackle those road landlords that allow people. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Phil. Is there any other comments? No, so if we could just note the slight change to the amendment that's on the report. Can we agree the recommendations that are on page 20?
Agreed.
Excellent, thank you. I now have to, as I declared earlier, I've got, I'm the chair of the West London Waste Authority, and to avoid any perception of a conflict of interest, I will leave the meeting during this item, and Councillor Natasha Proctor, as my deputy, will chair the meeting on this item. Could you remember to call me back in sometime, please? Thank you.
I'm sure we can manage that. I'll wait for you to leave first. Thank you. Okay, I can confirm that Councillor Hudson is leaving the room. Okay, he's left the room now. So can I please ask Councillor Palmer to introduce the report? Thank you. You're on mute, Varsha.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Deputy Leader. This report seeks approval for a planned project working with West London Waste Authority, which they are funding, and to delegate authority to the Director of Environmental Services to spend the funding as required by the terms, and to approve an increase in the capital project programme by 357k to reflect the allocation of the funding. The project is food diversion from residual and food waste minimisation. So there are 3 strands to the project that we will be working on, and they are communal bin stores, flats above shops, engagement and communications. So the communal properties have access to the recycling of their food waste. However, there are quite a few challenges there, and there are a lot of contamination and etc. So we would like to work with the residents around there, and this is a great opportunity to do so. With the flats above the shops, we're looking at space availability and maybe identifying where we could do share capacity with the relevant parties, so you know, to reduce that space, but be able to utilize working together. And with the engagement, obviously we want to work with our residents and the landlords and all the relevant parties to better understand, bring the awareness and to support the project and get the desired outcomes, which is basically to reduce the residual and increase the food waste. There is an environmental bill coming along very soon, so we do really need to improve on these things. And so we want to work with West London Waste Authority and our residents in order to bring this forward and improve those the reduction, etc., so that it helps us to reduce some of our costs as well, but also is environment friendly, and it also supports our climate change priorities as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. I can see Councillor Osborne has his hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you very much, and congratulations on being deputy leader. Welcome to the cabinet. I just want to ask. I mean, obviously, I'm broadly in favour of this and think it's a good thing to do. I just think it would be helpful if we had slightly more detail on the financial information section, particularly what reduction in food waste in the communal bins we're expecting and what the potential savings of that could be. If we have evidence from other boroughs where they've tried this, how much they've managed to divert the waste, just to understand if the £500,000 is well spent or not. It helps to understand the scale of the savings and the likelihood of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. We are working on the action. We're working on the action plan so that we can bring that forward to you as we develop it. We are working with 6 other boroughs on this as part of the authority. So it will be an interesting piece of work. And obviously, as the information comes forward, we'll share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Varsha. If there's no more questions, can we agree the report and the recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. In that case, can somebody get Graham back, please? Thank you. Just for the benefit of anybody that's watching this online, Councillor Henson is making his way back into the chamber.
Thank you very much. Are we okay to move on?
Ready to proceed?
Are we okay to move on now?
Yes, we're ready to proceed. Thank you.
Marvellous. Thank you very much, Natasha. We now move on to item number 11, which is the Council's accommodation strategy and the Harrow New Civic Centre. Before we start, can I ask the confidential appendices are noted here? Otherwise, Cabinet will need to move into a private session. Could Cabinet also note? Sorry, I heard a voice there. I think it's me. Could Cabinet also note this report also includes a reference from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the Accommodation Strategy, which was made following the committee meeting on the 17th of May. The reference is set out in the published supplemental agenda. And as agreed at the beginning of the meeting, Councillor Stephen Greek will be, as the Vice Chair of Scrutiny, will be speaking on this item in their capacity as the Vice Chair overview and scrutiny. And Councillor Sessions-Shah sent his apologies because he cannot make this evening. So is that noted?
Noted.
So I was getting an echo back. Is anyone else getting an echo?
I think you guys are in the same room. And
that's all right. We'll carry on anyway, and if it gets worse, we have to work out what we can do. So, in moving this report tonight, it is in recognition that this is a culmination of a lot of hard work over the past few years. Over the past year, we've seen the world change in the way people work, and that is not any different to Harrow Council, with many now working remotely or actually on a hybrid basis, exactly like we're doing tonight. It is quite clear that we don't need a massive civic centre anymore. Although a very few of us are in the civic centre tonight, there have been very few staff in here over the day, which has been like this since March last year. It would also cost an estimated £42 million to refurbish this building to bring it up to a suitable standard. We have also seen over the past few years a reducing number of residents who come to the Civic Centre for services, with over 90% of our residents interacting online. And so the report tonight sets out a considerable improvement that will allow our staff to work in a more modern, flexible environment, make more use of the vacant space at Forward Drive, build a new civic centre in Wealdstone, and because it will be smaller, allows us to build more affordable housing for the residents of Harrow. The accompanying reports from Avison Young, Savills and Volterra, who are specialists in their field, support the proposed recommendations on the agenda tonight. I want to make it clear that this is not just about home working. It is so much more. It's a complete working experience in home working that will provide a balance of office-based, flexible and remote working, which the staff are very positive about, as evidenced through the recent number of recent staff surveys. The Forward Drive site will be set up to ensure our staff can work more effectively and build a better collaboration with the staff who already work there at the depot. We've already made significant investment into our information technology that supports staff to effectively work remotely and also allows our residents to access council services much more easily. There are a few who still need that initial face-to-face contact with the council, and this will be accommodated. We're also looking at other access points so residents don't have to travel so far to access services that they need. The flexible futures paragraph set out more information as to how this will operate, investment that will be made and support that will be given. This report sets out that we will be building a smaller civic centre in Wealdstone as the council's public, community and civic space, with parking spaces underneath, an increased number of affordable homes for Harrow residents, and to establish Forward Drive Depot as the council's principal focus for staff, with ultra-modern and of high quality offices and meeting rooms, which will be a considerable improvement on the current civic centre. This is an important report that sets out a positive journey for the future that benefits our staff and our residents going forwards, and it also saves us ongoing costs as well, which I know is a main driver for some people. I would now like to ask if there's anyone else would like to ask any questions on the report. So can I invite Councillor Stephen Greek, actually, to present back? I think you've got 3 or 4 minutes, Stephen, if you could.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm here as you said, as Vice Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny to report on our pre-scrutiny work in relation to the proposed accommodation strategy and new civic centre as part of our ongoing scrutiny of the proposed Harrow Strategic Development Partnership. We held 3 sessions on the accommodation strategy, 2 informal sessions, one in March and the other in early May, followed by our formal meeting on the 17th of May. I would like to put on record our thanks to all the officers who supported us and participated in scrutiny. Thank you to also to the Leader and Cabinet members who took part, as well as representatives from Waits and Avison Young. You have our report in front of you. Our role was to ask questions rather than form a collective view, but I would like to highlight some key issues, queries and concerns from the report and raised by various members from across the committee. So firstly, queries were raised regarding the location of the various front desk services under the ancillary sites programme, and there were concerns about a lack of detail on where and how these will be delivered, and these services include homelessness, social care and registrar services, and the proposal is to spread them across the borough in various locations which are yet to be confirmed, and so far we only have options, suggestions and pilots, but no actual confirmation. Also, there was some confusion as to whether this would be temporary or permanent, but after some discussion it was confirmed this would be a permanent arrangement. Clearly in any accommodation strategy it's important to know where our officers and our services will be located, and it's not necessarily as clear as it could be from this strategy, and it's unclear also whether the strategy is designed around needs or whether the other way around, the needs have to be designed around the fundamentals of the strategy. On finances, there were queries and concerns about the level of peak borrowing and whether, how and when this could be covered by financial returns. We considered the entire cumulative costs of the accommodation strategy, which are now considerable. This includes the rising costs of forward drive, which are now up to 44 million, in addition to the 22 million cost of the new civic building, plus unspecified fit out costs for that building, and at least £500,000 for the ancillary sites. All of this should be kept in mind when assessing the total cost of the accommodation strategy and when discussing cost neutrality. Concern was also raised about the lack of business plan at this point to support the accommodation strategy and ensure an informed decision can be taken, albeit we were informed that the current plan is to publish this at the next stage of contract close. On parking, there were concerns raised about whether the 40 spaces at the new civic centre was sufficient and fit for purpose, especially for full council meetings where you get 55 councillors plus staff and members of the public, and also similarly for community events. Other parking options were mentioned, such as Churchill Place and Canning Road, but so far nothing is confirmed. One of the points raised was that there's no point in having an expensive new civic centre if people can't get there from around the borough. So we did feel it's important that this is addressed. We often found that the answers given in relation to this issue related to capacity and planning constraints, rather than addressing, fundamentally what the needs are of the council and the public. In terms of safety related to this issue, there were concerns about the safety of people leaving the new civic centre on foot late at night. This was first raised at our first informal meeting in March, and we still don't have much detail on any possible solution. It is absolutely essential that this is addressed, especially following the high-profile Sarah Everard case and similar previous cases. One suggestion that was made to us was that perhaps council meetings could be held in the daytime, but really, we felt, that the point needs to be made that that's not going to work if we want to continue to have a broad mix of councillors. We need a solution that works with how we operate as a council. In terms of flexible and remote working, there were concerns raised that we're yet to understand the long-term impacts of staff working 2 to 3 days a week from home. The idea is still quite new, yet we're baking it into the accommodation strategy. So the question needs to be asked, what happens if it doesn't work out? And then we find we need extra space, what do we do? In terms of the split between the democratic side of things and the administrative side of things, so with the democratic functions being done at the new civic and the administrative functions being done at Forward Drive, there was concern about the impact of this on accountability in the running of the council. There was a query about where senior officers will be based, which wasn't really fully answered, and we generally feel that more thought is needed about this. There were concerns about lack of consultation regarding the current plans for the Civic Centre and the wider accommodation strategy. Often what was quoted back to us was that the public consultation for the previous Civic Centre proposals were made, but this was some years ago, many years ago, and clearly things have changed a lot since then in terms of the Civic Centre proposals and the wider proposals. And there was also general concern that relying on the existing residents panel of around, I believe, 15 people should not be a substitute for full public consultation on these plans and consultation with other stakeholders. In terms of heritage, there was widespread concern to make sure that various heritage items in the current Civic Centre are preserved and continue to be displayed prominently in any new plans. This includes the mosaic on the Middlesex floor, the items in the Mayor's Parlour and the War Memorial. Hopefully that gives you a flavour of the work that has taken place at scrutiny. It would be beyond my remit to draw any conclusions as to what decision Cabinet should take this evening, but I do hope you'll consider the matters we've raised very carefully, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, they were interesting meetings, and I think you did scrutiny did ask very valid questions, because it is it is a major decision for the council in that sense. I think it's true to say that we are highly cautious and optimistic on the basis that the decision to move to the to Wealdstone was made previously. This is about changing the size of the civic centre in Wealdstone and using a more flexible approach to work and arrangements, which is becoming has been implemented by many businesses across the world now, a growing number of businesses. It's also a new way of working, but you'd have made a number of points in there, and I just want to respond to two. The accountability of it all, and this was raised online, that I think that the officers have made themselves available and probably more accessible during COVID, and we've been more accessible through online meetings than we could have done if we'd have been based in the Civic Centre building. Because when people fill in their diaries up, they can actually fit in more. Not encouraging them to do more, but they can do, and I think they have been very responsive to that. When we talk about a civic space, it is a civic space in the Civic Centre in the Wealdstone, but there's nothing stopping councillors from going down to the depot and using that, booking in their space as well, exactly the same way we do it in the old Civic Centre. But I must admit, it's like a mausoleum in here. It's so empty. There's very few people. And on the consultation, this wasn't just the small panel originally. This was the Building Better Harrow campaign that took place from 2014 right through to 2000. I think someone will correct me if it was 2017. Before the decision started to be made. So there's been a wide consultation around location, which is why it was signed off. There's a lot of research involved, but I would actually finish by thanking you again for the amount of time and effort that the scrutiny members put in. I thought it was really genuine questions that were coming through, and there is always concern at these sort of things. We've got two hands up. I've got Councillor Paul Osborne and John Higgins. Paul, did you want to go first?
Yeah, if you want me to. Thank you, Leader. I just want to be very clear at the beginning of what I say. I think this is the wrong thing to do, but I think this is the wrong time to do it. It will not stand if I have any say come next May. And if the people of Harrow vote the same way they did a few weeks ago, or indeed they did in December 19, I will stop this when we take control of the council. It's the wrong time because we still haven't agreed a flexible future plan. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID. We don't know what's going to happen with work patterns. We don't know how that's all going to pan out. And yet we're making generational decisions on the basis of incomplete information. And it's the wrong thing for four main reasons. Firstly, it's not a new civic centre. Let's be very clear. What we're actually doing is having two civic centres. The thing that's called Harrow New Civic isn't actually a civic centre. It's just a series of meeting rooms that are going to cost the taxpayers of Harrow £20 million. It's not cost neutral. The only way you make it cost neutral is by totally excluding the costs of building Forward Drive. The business plan for Forward Drive was deeply flawed. And I love the way the report touches on this and talks about the council planning process. Let's be very clear. The council planning committee, which actually, Leader, interestingly, you sat on that meeting, specifically put a condition in to stop the top 2 floors being put out for commercial rent. Cabinet, which you sat on, then decided to build it on the basis that it would have the top 2 floors being commercially available for rent. It misses out costs, like the costs of fitting out the new Harrow Civic Centre. It misses out the costs that we've put in terms of IT that make some of this possible. And the figures, as Councillor Pritesh Patel kept saying, keep changing from report to report to presentation to presentation. Thirdly, Leader, it's not fit for purpose. As I've said, it's not a civic centre. There is insufficient parking both in Forward Drive and in Harrow New Civic. There won't even be enough parking spaces if all the councillors wanted to drive to the new civic centre, let alone if staff and residents wanted to drive. It's not shown to us how it will be safe to have lone working and late working, and we would like that question answered before we agree an accommodation strategy. And also, it won't result in the regeneration that the council originally started this whole process with the aim of doing. It was designed to regenerate Buildstone. The council itself now admits that there's very little regeneration that will happen as a result of the Harrow New Civic Centre. And again, reason 4, it's already wasted millions of pounds in this. I mean, let's be clear, the council has already taken what was going to be the Harrow New Civic to the planning committee and got planning permission. We've now kind of forgotten that, and that's rubbed out of history. And we still keep talking about the Harrow New Civic. Well, actually, we have planning permission for the old Harrow New Civic. This is a massive cost on the council wasted in generating this. We've also had massive cost overruns on the Forward Drive site. All of this has wasted money that could have been used delivering local services. And finally, there's been no meaningful consultation either properly with staff as whether they would want to be based on that site, or with residents as if they want that to be the place where civic transactions happen. Thankfully though, Leader, this plan is all so far behind schedule and will take so long even to get to the stage where you can do something, it won't actually even be going to planning permission until next May, which means we can stop this. The only thing I worry about is how many millions are going to be wasted between now and then for a scheme that will never work. Thank you, Leader.
I was looking for the question, Paul. You made a number of comments.
No, there was no question. It was clearly a speech. Sorry, that's why I didn't put my hand up when you said questions.
But it has been consulted. I just sort of it's a number of comments, so just note your comments. John, I think John Higgins has hand up.
Just to be clear, it's very disappointing that there's been no cross-party discussions on this. There has been briefings that we've had from officers, but there's been no cross-party discussions. There's no attempts to get cross-party consensus. This is a generational decision, and the fact that the major opposition party hasn't even been spoken to properly by the administration about this is again going to waste millions of pounds. But I think that's important to note. Thank you, Leader.
I may disagree. John, is John there?
Yes, thanks, Leader. I've just got a couple of specific questions related to the impact on the voluntary sector. Really, I can see from the report its main focus is around the council's accommodation needs for staff and members and what have you. But I suppose just to acknowledge that groups, voluntary sector groups, big and small, use the civic at different times of the year as one-off events, and also some organisations actually run services from council premises. I just wondered if there'd been any consideration thus far about what the impact will be on the sector of these proposed changes, and particularly whether there'll be any adverse financial impact. And really, the second question really is the extent to which any of those impacts can be addressed or incorporated within the wider strategy as it's been developed. Really, that's my two questions.
Thank you, John. So I'll make sure my microphone keeps going on and off. I don't really know what's happening to it this morning. Yes, the decision that the Cabinet's making tonight is to reduce the size of the office space available at the new site in Wealdstone on Peel Road. The civic space will be available, and it would also have meeting rooms. I think there's space for about 100 staff, I think. So I'm trying to find it on the my little screen. But it is part of it that is, when I said right at the beginning, it is for civic space, which is councillors, and I'll come back to the element around parking in a moment. It also talks about the, I'll get the right words to make it easier. We'll find it. So it's making sure it's also a community and civic space that's going to be built as a civic centre site. So the community, there will be community access. They're looking at whether the library could be moved into there and other services as well. But that's where the focal point of the civic space is really about. The question has been raised on some points around parking, but when you look at it and say about full council meetings, we have 5 full council meetings a year when all 55 councillors will start to turn up, and officers as well. And most people actually don't drive the civic centre, but it's actually the Wealdstone site is more accessible than the current site, so people would actually walk to there as well. So there is sufficient room. And John, you had another question that I think I've overlooked. Sorry.
Yeah, it was really the extent to which the impacts on the voluntary sector could be incorporated within the strategy, because accepted the decision that's been made today, but it is part of a wider accommodation strategy. And so that my question was, could there be a section that incorporates the impacts or the benefits likewise to the sector really of that strategy?
Yes, so the voluntary sector is being looked at as part of the overall accessibility to the council services, but also how the council can support the voluntary sector going forward. So there's also looking at how much community space can be made available, either through developments the council undertakes, or even some of the other large developers that come into Harrow. An example is the Gayton Road site, where there's community space being made available there, which has just been taken up. But there's other sites as well where they come forward and offer this as a way forward. Most of this will be done through Alex Gisnet's team and through the Voluntary Action Harrow, I think, isn't it? The voluntary coordinating groups that take place, and which Sue leads on in her area. So it's not we wanted to work more collaboratively with the voluntary sector. I think we've learned a lot through the COVID pandemic, and I think we've built up some really great sort of partnerships and arrangements, and a lot of trust has been built in, and we wouldn't want to lose that going forward. So it will be part of the journey we do. This report is really talking about how staff will operate going forwards, which is most do want to work remotely, more flexibly, and this is how it makes it a more efficient way to do it. Is there any other questions that we have, or anyone else wish to contribute? No, I'm looking around the room and I got told not to do that. So we now move on to the recommendations. So I keep hearing a buzzing sound button through. Can we agree the recommendations which are on page 108 109, and note the reference from the overview and scrutiny committee, which Stephen referred to in his feedback, and it's published within the supplementary agenda. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Excellent. We now move on to item 12. Which is the Harrow Town Centre Public Space Protection Order. Paymana, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you very much, Chair. This report proposes to introduce a public space protection order to cover Harrow Town Centre to address matters of antisocial behaviour for a period of 3 years. Public space protection orders provide a power to deal with nuisance or problems that directly affect an area, in this case, Harrow Town Centre. This public space protection order in Harrow Town Centre is looking to manage the following in a proper way so that it does not cause antisocial behaviour and nuisance to businesses or people in the town centre. The application of music and voice, we've had several different amplifiers being used and competing and causing nuisance. So we're now asking people to write to us for permission to use amplifiers in the town centre so we can manage this noise. There's currently a buskers pilot in place to help manage the buskers too, so there is no competing noise. Financial agreements, people trying to get visitors to sign up to them. So we want to formalise this process of how we work with businesses and charities to allow them to operate in the town centre. We will be controlling this more to avoid causing nuisance. The placing of tables, chairs, stands and other fixtures on the street. We're witnessing more and more people coming into the town centre and setting up stalls for leaflets, goods or other things without any consideration and carrying out this in a way that doesn't benefit the local area. So we're just asking people to write for permission so we can ensure that this is done in a safe way and it's not just placed wherever convenient, but has consideration for people and businesses in the town centre. The feeding of birds and vermin. This activity encourages damage to the area and it can cost us thousands of pounds to clean every year, so it presents a public health risk. In the first instance, we will ask people not to feed birds in the town centre and the new rules will be explained to them before any fine is issued. The distribution of leaflets, due to the litter that it causes and the placing of furniture, we're asking people to write to us so that we can give designated time slots so this can happen in a safe manner without nuisance or annoyance or without causing littering. And lastly, the illegal street trading. This is not associated with businesses because they're covered under a different licence. So we've seen an increase in people trying to manipulate residents and visitors of Harrow by selling unsafe and counterfeit and unauthorised products. This PSPO, the Public Space Protection Order, would give us the authority to fine and prosecute illegal street trading. In order for these permissions to be for these activities to be carried out, we're just asking people to simply email licensing@harrow.gov.uk with the details of their proposal, evidence of insurance and a risk assessment, and further details will be provided on the website. We know that from previous public space protection orders that this is an efficient and effective way to control these issues. And in line with the guidance, we've consulted with the community and local businesses, and more than 75% of residents on every single issue that I just listed voted for this coming into effect in the town centre. So we aim to use the June period to do some publicity around this as part of our educational approach. We want to make sure that we get a message out to everyone that causing nuisance in the town centre will not be welcome and will act against them. And officers will be working in the town centre with partners to promote and inform people about the PSPO, and we'll be making sure that we monitor the third-party contractor. So we're taking an inform, educate and enforce approach, and the issuing of fines to control all of this is to fight back against those who don't value our borough, and it's a pledge that we made as an administration in 2018, and therefore this public space protection order would help us fulfil that. And in the current world of COVID-19, it makes sense so that we can manage the different levels of activities in the town centre by asking residents and visitors for permission, so they can ask for permission to have proper time slots. And I ask Cabinet to approve the implementation of the recommendations and would like to add additional recommendation to this report. May I outline this, please, Chair?
Yes.
The additional recommendation number 6 for the PSPO report is Cabinet is asked to note that the PSPO will be subject to a communications campaign to raise awareness and aid in educating all, and full information will be easily accessible on the council website on www.harrow.gov.uk/licensing. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Pimana. Is there any questions? No? Thank you. So if we can go to the recommendations, which we note the additional parts to the recommendations. They're on page 226. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Excellent. That now moves us on to item 13, which is the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government Future High Street Fund, which is on page 297 97 to 308. I just briefly say a few words as introduction. Using data and support generated through the community work in Wealdstone through 2018, Mark Billington and his team submitted a bid to the government's Future High Street Fund. The proposal has been supported through community engagement and redesign following feedback, and will mean a new building and the building of a new footbridge linking Wealdstone to the Kodak site, which is a major development, and then the pedestrian route through to Wealdstone. And excitingly, this will include intelligent lighting that will brighten with resident movement. It is a successful bid. It said earlier on that we don't have a lot of money ourselves, and I think we're getting quite adept at writing these bids, and it's very welcome to make an improvement to the area around leading into Wealdstone High Street and extending it out into new Kodak development. Natasha, did Varsha? Oh, sorry, Varsha's waving at me. Varsha, did you want to speak on this one?
Thank you, Leader. I mean, you've said everything, and it is a positive project, and it is a long-term project, and it is a change to the infrastructure. And, you know, we will be working with all stakeholders to ensure that, you know, everyone is on board and we have the desired effect. The bridge is for everyone to utilise, and it has environmental and health benefits, obviously, by providing a new direct and convenient pedestrian link with Wealdstone. It is a vast amount of money, so you know, we will make sure that everyone's on board. We have everyone. The community engagement did happen just to get the initial thoughts, and it was very positive with the Wealdstone group. So, you know, obviously there are the stakeholders as well. So we will ensure that everyone participates in this project, which is very positive. Thank you.
Thank you. Natasha, did you have your hand up there?
Yeah, I'll just keep it short. Agreeing with what Varsha has said, I'd just like to make the point that the engagement that we have had with the residents of Wealdstone has been overwhelmingly positive, and it shows what can be done when we work with the people that we represent.
Thank you, Natasha. Are there any hands up? Oh, Paul, quick hand up.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say I'm sure Cabinet would be delighted to welcome the support that central government has given to Wealdstone, both with this and with the other funding that they've made available. The only thing I would say is it is really important that whilst we regenerate Wealdstone, we don't forget the town centre. I am very concerned about the future of the town centre, and I do think leaving sites like the Greenhill Way car park, claiming they're strategic sites and then not doing anything about them doesn't help. Obviously, what's going to happen with the Debenham site is something that we're nervous about, and other potential issues just in terms of bringing that town centre back to where we will think it should be rather than probably where it is at the moment. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Is any other hands? No, I know your point about the. Am I getting an echo? I am again, aren't I? That's Paul. He's fiddling with the electrics over there. No, we did. It's because we've done a lot of community engagement work through Wealdstone that we managed to successfully bid for this funding, and it is a benefit to the location. We're also looking at what other funding streams are available. But if we were properly funded, we probably wouldn't have to keep applying out to these funds in the first place. But it is a benefit, and we do welcome the government. I've written back to the minister thanking him for his kindness in giving us the money to build a bridge across the railway, which otherwise we would not be able to afford on their own, to be fair. The site you're talking about in Debenhams is privately owned, and it is a concern because we don't know if it's going to change ownership or what the location is on that. As part of the development plan going forwards, we will be incorporating the Greenhill subway site is included within that, and we have to consult as part of the development plan process. But it is looking at what we can do for the future over that. So there's no other hands up at the moment. Is the recommendations on page 298 agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
We now move to item the discretionary retail relief scheme. Natasha.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick on this as well because time is ticking on. But since 2019-2020, the government has provided a business rates retail discounts for retail properties, which for 2020-2021 it expanded to include the leisure and hospitality sectors. On 3rd of March 2021, the government confirmed that the expanded retail discounts would continue to apply in 2021-2022 at 100% for 3 months, from the 1st of April 2021 to the 30th of June 2021, and at 66% to 2/3 for the remaining period from the 1st of July 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. This report sets out the Council's revised policy regarding the local discretionary retail relief scheme for the financial year 1st of April 21 to the 31st of March 22. I'd like to say this policy is in accordance with the announcement made by central government on the 23rd of March 2020 and the 3rd of March 2021 that it would provide business rates retail relief for occupied retail properties with a rateable value of any size. The discretionary relief policy has therefore been amended to dovetail with central government guidance applicable for the financial year 21-22. For the year 21-22, the value of relief will therefore be at 100% for 3 months, from 1st of April 2021 to 30th of June 2021 at 66% for the remaining period from 1st of July 21 until 31st of March 2022. Lots of numbers there, but hopefully that gives a good overview. Thank you.
Should have made the report a whole lot clearer to me.
I hope so.
Is there any questions on the report? No. So the recommendations are on page 310. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
We now move to item 15, which is appointment of cabinet advisory panels, consultative forums, appointment of chairs. These have previously been announced, but it's up to cabinet to agree the appointments that are listed on Appendix A. Is there any questions? Paul?
Thank you. There's a couple of things that are wrong on our list that somehow seems to have got lost from what we sent, but I'm happy to send that through and make changes through the normal channels. The thing I would ask though is the planning policy working group meets in private. Given the importance of a local plan, I think it would be helpful if we could have some public discussions on that. I understand the finance implications of it. So what I would suggest you consider, and you don't have to answer now, is to have an item on the major developments panel at each meeting, just to take a particular area of the potential local plan and discuss it. That way it doesn't really add to the cost of it, but actually has much more public debate about what's going to be in the new local plan, rather than just councillors meeting in a private working group. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. You've raised an important point. The working group is for councillors to have that debate between themselves in that sense, to get the sensitivity to bring forward those recommendations. There is a number of consultation places that take place, which is also gathering feedback, and some of those will be online. This is widely consulted upon, with about, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times it goes out to consultation before we get Secretary of State sign off, and that will be fully open to all the public. This is the chance for councillors to discuss some of the what they wish to put through, and then we can also have joint meetings as well with the residents as part of the consultation process. If I've got any of that wrong, then Councillor Ferry would let me know. It's done in the past.
I just think it'd be helpful to have some public discussions before the formal consultations, which are it's very hard to engage sometimes. And actually, we've heard today from a number of questions from residents who have very big issues in terms of bits that might be in the local plan. I just think having some public discussion on some of that before the consultation process would be helpful.
So I think there is okay.
Yeah, I think you summed that up very well, Leader. But I think that's very sensible to have an update on what the stage of the London plan is at the major development panels, which meet 3 times a year. But as you point out, there is a very exhaustive 3-part consultation period, and no, this isn't being done behind closed doors. It's a process which takes 2.5 years, and it also has an examination in public by the planning inspectorate at the end of it. But I'm quite happy that the major developments panel has an update every time it meets.
Excellent. So we note that recommendation from Paul. So the note, can we note the appointments listed in Appendix A in the report, which is on pages 344 to 349? Excellent.
Noted.
Noted.
Appointment of portfolio holder assistants. They've also previously been published, but this report is for information as the executive is required to confirm the appointments of any portfolio holder assistant. The SRA for portfolio assistants was approved at the council in February, so we're just confirming the appointments that have previously been made. So unless anyone's got any questions, the recommendation is on page 352. Paul.
Sorry, just a question. We have a portfolio assistant for Community Cohesion East, but we don't seem to have one for Community Cohesion West. I just wondered if there was a particular reason that was being done.
Only on the fact that Paymana was picking up the West and is continuing in that role, and then she's supporting James Lee supporting Paymana in the East to build up the community cohesion work that's already taking place through Wealdstone, South Harrow, Rayners Lane, North Harrow, and moving into Edgware next, which are the sites identified on previous forms. So that's the recommendations. Can they be agreed? Excellent. We now move on to the penultimate item of the evening, which is the timetable for the development of the council policy framework. These are statutory policies that the council has to set out a timetable for in the first meeting following annual council. The policy of note is that the local development plan, which we've been talking about most of tonight, is starting its long journey through the system with its first decision by Cabinet in October 21. So unless there's any questions about the timetable, it's a statutory timetable. So can Cabinet note the timetable of the council policy framework? Thank you. That leads us to item 18, which is any other urgent business. I haven't been notified of any. So thank you very much for attending our first hybrid sort of meeting. I think there's a few things we can learn from it, and we have a good weekend and bank holiday weekend, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.